Hi, Ed here from Crystal Clear Aquatics, and today is the first day on site on the next project. So here you can see a very large pond at the front of the property. It's been here for some years. I think it was approaching 20 or even more than 20 years, so the lining has come to the end of its life. And unfortunately, there's been a couple of issues here. One with the local wildlife, either badgers or foxes, has caused an awful lot of damage to areas of the pond liner and created some very large splits in certain places. Can't quite see it now, but there's some big tears in the liner. Lots of small sort of micro holes all around the sides as well, which would have been pointless to try and repair. And also you can see lots of plants have started to grow through the lining. In fact, just here we've got the issue of a couple of bamboos that are growing quite close to the edge of the pond. Now thankfully these aren't particularly large or invasive varieties of bamboo. However, of course the root structure on a bamboo can be pretty sharp, and it's just, you know, try to discover a local water source, and here it's growing through the pond liner. We've also got a little birch that's popped its way through, and a big juncus as well. So this is a reline job. The pond is going to be drained and cleaned. All of the surrounding stonework is going to be removed, and the pond is going to be relined with a heavy duty 1mm Firestone rubber pond liner. But in the process we're going to change it slightly. It's an opportunity to put in some planters to change the stonework around the edge. We're going to go with a slightly blockier, more natural kind of theme with some natural chunks of stone. There's a lovely slope here on the ground which is perfect for a nice cascade or a stream. There's going to be a nice seating area over the back there where the bench is. Filtration is going to be incorporated. There's no filtration system on this, so we're going to incorporate a large Awaza Screen-O-Matic 140,000 system, and that can hide nicely up in the little tree area up here. So lots to get on with. Today is the first day. I've got my team with me. I've got Dave.
Good morning.
So we'll crack on. So today's job is setting up base, making home, rigging up all our tarps and holding tanks and bits and pieces. There's an awful lot of paraphernalia and equipment and materials that get brought into sites like this when we're doing jobs like this. And then the first thing to tackle is the pond is going to be fully emptied and cleaned. Obviously we're only at sort of half volume here anyway, but there's still a fair amount of water that needs to be pumped out, and a lot of this I want to retain. Although it's a bit murky and a bit green, there's a lot of beneficial bacteria which I keep banging on about when I'm talking about this, but it's important you've got established water when you're putting it back into the pond. And there are actually lots of, or I think there are going to be lots of rudd in the pond as well, so we've got to try and retain as much of this water as possible. Doesn't matter how many times you do this sort of job, never gets any easier. And when you get down to the last of it, it doesn't matter how good equipment you've got, it always comes down to buckets, scoops, hands and knees. Isn't that right, Dave?
It does.
It's a yucky job, but somebody's got to do it.
That's why I'm here.
So we're making good progress today. The pond is drained, all the slurry and the sludge is taken out, and in the process we've discovered lots of smooth newts and lots of toads as well, which is unusual. And I've got this tiny little baby. Look at this chap. Isn't he lovely? Here she is, baby. Very cute. Oh, off he goes. I shall go and put him discreetly in the bushes somewhere. Taking a little diversion from the heavy groundwork of the pond, although I'll show you how progress is after one day. We've made a lot of mess after one day. We've got to break an egg to make an omelette, and this is a big egg to break But you can see the pond has been drained and cleared. All of the muck and the sediment has been taken out, of which there was a lot. We've started to break away the stonework all around the edging, dig it out a little bit so we can start to get a uniform shelf. This area here, there was already a natural crazy paving Horsham stone paved area here, which has been removed, and we've got down to the concrete foundation there. That's going to be a nice seating area, so we'll put some new stonework back there. But as a little diversion, we've been mucking about with the holding tanks here with the fish. So the livestock, it was a very, very lightly stocked pond, but there were lots and lots of very small golden rudd, which we've got in the tank. But you can see the colour of the water, it's incredibly green, pea soup green, and that's because there was no filtration on the pond. And this is something which is going to be incorporated obviously at the end of the job. But just as a little deviant, I've set up a small filtration system here. We've got a little Awaza filter clear just to set up on the holding tank with an old Aquamax pump in here. And I wouldn't normally bother with switching on a UV, but as a little test, just to show you guys how important filtration with a UV steriliser is, I want to show you how green the pond is now, and we'll give it a few days with the filtration system and with the UV running, and we'll see how this clears. And you'll see the importance then of a UV clarifier and what it really does to a pond. It's getting a bit dark, looks a bit threatening. So I think we're going to start packing up for the day, think about going home. Good morning, it's a lovely sunny day. It's been a couple of days since I've posted any video on this job, so I'll just show you what we've been up to. So the bulk of the footprint of the pond has been done now. There wasn't an awful lot of shape changing to be done on this job. The pond itself was a nice shape and size, but it needed a few adjustments here and there. Some of the curves around this outer edge in my opinion weren't quite right, so I wanted to alter that slightly. I had to make sure that there was a good level uniform shelf all the way around the pond that we could get the stonework on. And now we're at the stage of thinking about water levels, which is very important. Pond line has been ordered. Now that there's no more major kind of excavation to be done, I could measure up and get that on order. But the pond itself originally had a very useful concrete foundation here, which the stonework was sitting on, but unfortunately this isn't level, and there's a difference of about 6 inches on this side of the pond from the concrete collar to the other side over there where Dave currently is. Now the issue here is that I want to make sure that all stonework starts below water level by at least 6 inches, so that when the pond level drops slightly, you're not revealing liner, you're revealing rock. Now over at the back over here, I drop down to the pond. I've had my laser out and I've checked levels all the way around. And I've lightly scored in the bank here. This line you can see in the earth, this is what will essentially be water level, and this is great. So stonework is going to start down here on this shelf. We've got a good 10 inches or so of water, of stonework starting below the water, which is going to look nice. And obviously the stone will carry on above the water level to retain the earth bank over here. But around the other side of the pond, where the shelving and the concrete collar comes up, that line I've scored on the earth is taken from this level. This will be water level at this side of the pond. Now this obviously is low, the ground is low here, and I'm going to have to put in a small sort of raised section of retaining wall. This area of the pond will become a sort of a hard standing, a patio where a bench can sit, and you'll get a nice view looking across the pond. So it would be quite nice to have a slight raised section here with a bit of natural stone walling to retain all of that. But that means over here that we've only really got 4 inches or so of water between the shelf level and the maximum water level, and I want all these areas here to be planting zones, areas where I can fill with shingle and plant up, and I need a good 4 or 5 inches of shingle and really 2 or 3 inches of water above this. I don't want the shingle to break the surface and to, you know, make the pond look smaller. I want this to be submersed, and there's 2 things I can do. One is I can raise the level of the water and bring it up to about this rock height, and that'll give me sufficient. But in doing so, I think the pond is going to look unnaturally high compared to the rest of the land and the rest of the ground, and it also increases the pond volume significantly, which is going to have knock-on effects for filtration and other things. So unfortunately, the only option is to dig this down and to do a bit of hard grafting and get this shelf down to the level at the back of the pond. So that's what I shall be doing today. Thankfully the concrete's coming out quite nice and easily. Pretty chunky stuff. But once that's out, that brings this nicely down to the level that I want it to be. So we're going to gain an extra 4 or 5 inches of water depth here, and that will bring it in with the other side of the pond. Better crack on. Getting familiar with my spades and digging bars at the moment. So I'm now making a start on simulating a stream. Again, it gives me an idea in my mind if I can sort of dry stone and just put a few things down on the ground, walk away from it, have a good look from various viewing spots. Gives me an idea to start to sort of formulate a plan. Lots of reclaimed stone on this job, some lovely great big Horsham stone slabs that were part of a natural paved area which we've kept hold of, and these are going to be fantastic spill stones for the cascade. We've got a lovely big spill stone here with a big drop. The water level is probably going to be 10 inches or so below the top of this stone, which is going to be more than enough to give a lovely drop and a lovely sound. We're going to have about 35,000 litres per hour flowing over this when we've got the two pumps combined. So a couple of smaller spills either side, should be plenty of water, plenty of flow to give a decent effect on a stone of this sort of size. The embankment here behind it is a perfect elevation, perfect height for me to be able to get the stream looking nice and natural by having everything lower than ground level. It's very important that the spill stones and the water level itself is a good few inches lower than ground level to keep it looking natural. So I've got plenty of depth here that I can dig the bank in and keep those stones below ground level. And all I'm doing at the moment is I'm just literally plonking stones down on the floor at certain angles so I can, in my mind, start to sort of formulate a plan as to the route and the shape of the cascade. There's a lot of imagination going on here, trying to imagine how the water's going to flow, what it's going to look like. But once I've got these spill stones in an approximate position I like, I can dig out that path, starting from the bottom and working my way up, and get those stones laid down. There's going to be another couple of drops here, probably come back to about where you can see this 4-inch pipe coming out of the ground. Now this is coming off of a downpipe from the roof of the house. It's a way of helping to top the pond up, and we'll hang on to this, but it needs to be redirected and routed away from the cascade, entering the pond at a different position. So lots of digging to do. The edges of the pond have been scraped and sculpted, and are essentially ready for me to put a bit of sand down and then the fleece and the liner. So the bulk of the pond work has been done. The liner will need to be lifted. All of the ground behind this, or underneath it, needs to be tamped down. There's a lot of rocks and sharp objects in here. Some bits and pieces that are really sticking through the liner, which are no good. In fact, let me show you a couple of areas here, and it's like this throughout the pond. So you can see these lumps and bumps poking through the liner. I mean, that's already punctured the liner. There's a few repairs here, but this is just a stone that's sticking out of the ground. It may even be a root possibly, but this is the importance of preparing the ground and making sure that you put as much fleece and underlay as possible to help prevent things like this causing problems. The pond liner is really only as good as how you prepare the ground. So all of this is going to have to be tamped, a couple of inches of sand probably put down, and I'm going to be triple lining this with fleece. The original fleece is kept, and I'll be putting 2 layers of heavy duty 250 GSM pond fleece on top of this. And then the main pond liner itself is a heavy duty 1mm lining, and then a secondary area of lining underneath all of the stonework. So it's lots of layers to make sure that we protect the main pond liner. Currently the electrics are being supplied by a twin exterior socket here, which was fine at the time. There was just a pump plugged into this and a small extension powering another switch box at the other side of the pond. But now the filtration system and the bulk of the equipment are going to be concealed up in this little planted area. It would be sensible to get the electrics moved over here. So Dave is busy trenching away, chasing back the original armoured cable so we can get enough slack on this and pull it round to put it in the correct position. It's pretty hard digging, it's very dry. How are you getting on?
All right, thank you. It is hard.
It is, but nearly there. Only another 2 trenches to go.
Yeah.
So lots to get on with today, as ever. So finally, construction of a sorts is beginning. It's nice to start putting stuff back into the ground, having spent such a long time taking everything apart. You can see here that the paving area is starting to take shape. So we've got a bit of a retaining wall that's gone in here, which will bring the levels up for the seating area for the patio. This was where a big clump of bamboo was growing originally, and although the bamboo's out, there's still lots and lots of this very fibrous root that needs to come out before I can get a sub base in. So that's pretty tough work today. You can see over there at the other side of the pond, the stream, the cascade, has been essentially scraped out of the ground and given me an idea of the overall dimensions and size. I think the spill stones need to come down a couple of inches further underground. That final spill stone going into the pond is a fraction high for my liking. I prefer that to be level with the surrounding ground or a fraction below. So I'll dig that down a little bit lower. But it's nice to see that in. I mean, these are sort of jobs that we would normally tackle once the pond has been lined and once the stonework has gone in. But current restrictions from COVID mean that the pond liner has been delayed quite a lot longer than I would normally expect. So we're just cracking on with these jobs first of all. Dave has been doing all of the trenching for me. So we've got a 2-inch supply, which will be coming from the pond, from the pump, feeding the filtration system, and we've also got a conduit here to supply some electrical cables to an FM master for remote control and to supply power feed to a switch box. All right?
Yes, thank you.
Hot work.
It is.
So it's good actually for me to document this now, because it's good for a future reference. Heavy duty pipe work, heavy duty conduit. Got a slab down here for the filtration system that will be going on there. Let's carry on round. We've got all the trenching done for the return from the filtration system. So it's a 4-inch return from the filter, and that's all buried underground here on a nice gradual decline back down to the pond. And then the top of the stream, so the 4-inch pipe will obviously end up feeding the cascade via a 4-inch tank connector, and that will supply the header pool, the top pool here, which will then flow back down into the pond. The rainwater overflow from the house has been diverted and is entering the pond over here now. And the only other trench we've had to do so far is an overflow. There was an overflow in place originally, but it was all broken up and blocked up with roots and bits and pieces. So again, going with a 2-inch pipe, we'll have a through tank connector here with an articulated joint so that we can calibrate and set the water depth to whatever height we want. And that's been trenched and is going out to the drainage gully at the edge of the property over here. And all these things can be filled in now. So this is all great prep work for when the liner and the rock, etc. turns up. We've got all of the stonework, or a large majority of the stonework is turning up tomorrow. A good 10 tonnes or so of rock and aggregates and various bits and pieces. I'm hoping the delivery driver is going to be able to get up the driveway without issues. Otherwise tomorrow, a very hot day, 32 degrees here. We'll be wheelbarrowing large quantities of heavy materials up a steep driveway, which I hope not to have to do. It's going to be lovely to get the pond liner put in here. And I tell you, when this is done, this is definitely one job that I'm sure Dave and I will both be having a swim and a frolic in. I should be diving off that bank straight into the deep end. If you remember my little experiment at the beginning of the job with the UV, you can see the difference it's made on the water tank here, lovely and clear. And again, I'm now filtering the water in the big bowser here. Obviously I wanted to pump this back into the pond when the liner arrives so that I can get the liner seated. I mean, this is a drop in the ocean to the overall volume of the pond, but it's going to be a good head start to get the pond started and to get the liner down. But we'd need, I reckon, 4 or 5 of these full to fill that pond. I think we've worked out an approximate volume of about 19 to 20,000 gallons. So when the pond is filled up, it's going to be a very large feature. But this is already starting to clear. I've just bolted on this briefly an old Bitron 110 UVC, which I've got on the floor here, and an old Laguna pressure flow 12,000, and actually in the last 4 or 5 days the water has gone from pea soup green to brown, which is good. That shows the UV's working, and now we need the filtration system to kick in and to start picking up the particles to clear the water. But it's definitely clearing, so that's always a good sign. And again, it just goes to show you the importance of running filtration, particularly with the UV, if you want to clarify water. Had a result this morning. The delivery driver has managed to get up the driveway, so we haven't got to wheelbarrow it up. Hurrah! Well, good morning. It's another week. In fact, I had last week off, which was rather pleasant. We're in the position now where we're waiting for the pond liner and the underlay to turn up. The majority of the prep work has been done. I had quite a nice jolly at home, which was rather nice. I've come back and have been greeted with a nice clear holding tank. So this has been now filtering on here for about 10 days. 9 days, something like that, and I can just about see the bottom of this now. So this just goes to show the real benefits of filtration, particularly with the UVC. Very, very important. But that was pea soup green before I started, and it's got rid of that nicely. So a little bit of final prep work to do before the pond liner can go in, and I've wanted to delay doing this as long as possible because the ground has been quite nice and moist. It's had a nice stable sort of environment underneath this liner and underlay, and I didn't want any of this clay to dry out at all. But now you can see some of the things that we're dealing with which hadn't been dealt with originally. Lots of rocks, lots of protrusions and sharp things sticking out, all of which are going to pose a threat to the new pond liner going in. And the only way to deal with this is a little bit of physical labour, just the tamp, and whack it all down, and the clay is a fantastic surface for this. And then once we've got rid of the bulk of it, and some of these stones are going to have to be removed and the ground's going to have to be packed in with some clay afterwards, a layer of sand can go over this, because I think tamping alone isn't going to be sufficient. And then on top of the sand we're going to have the 2 or 3 layers of fleece and underlay. But this is really important to do upon this sort of size. It's not something that you're going to want to have to readdress or try and repair in the immediate future, so it needs to be got right now. Once again, we seem to have picked a blisteringly hot day to do any of this physical labour. Forecast today is set for 34 degrees where I'm working, so I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to take it doing this. We'll crack on and keep going. So we've been working our way around the pond, tamping and shaping and just getting rid of some of the lumps and bumps. And here's a close-up of some of the things that you need to look out for and we're dealing with. I mean, this has been there from probably from the original pond line and just wasn't dealt with at the time. This is a piece of timber just sticking out of the ground, and that's really nasty. That there was a hole on the liner originally, and that would certainly damage a new liner as well, so that has to go. And lots of this West Sussex sandstone here sticking out of the clay. I mean, although these aren't particularly sharp, they're very angular. There's a few sort of sharp corners here, and even with some fleece over the top of this, the pressure of the water pushing against the pond liner is sort of implying an immense force against the liner, and this is really something that you don't want to have. Now, I don't want to remove big rocks like this if I can help it, because it's going to leave a big cavity behind it which is going to need to be filled to prevent this lot from potentially sort of subsiding. So thankfully in this kind of wet clay it's quite squidgy, and you can kind of mold it to the shape, tamp it into position, so a lot of these rocks can be just hit and knocked further back into the clay so that they're not quite so obvious. It's far too hot for this though. So even that big rock, look, I was able to force it in rather than remove it. And I'd much rather do that because it just helps to firm the banks, firm the sides, and stop the potential for any, or help to reduce the potential for any sort of subsidence in the future. Well, yet again, it's another scorcher. I don't know, this is about the 7th day on the trot where we've had temperatures above 32 degrees. Feels very warm. Today is a milestone day. The pond line is supposed to be arriving and the pond underlay. So this is final prep work on the excavation to do all the final dressing, to get rid of the lumps and bumps, any roots, etc. And we are laying a layer of sand. Certain areas, the base of the pond is lovely and sort of well tamped down clay with no lumps and bumps, so we don't need to do much at all on there. But the shelving that we've dug here, there are some rocks and bits and pieces that are closer to the surface. So here we're just putting a layer of soft sand, and this works in two ways. This helps to cushion some of the sharp protrusions that are sticking out of the ground, but it also helps to level, so that when the pond liner goes on, this shelf will look that much sharper, that much sort of more uniform, create a nice level surface onto which to build the stonework. This sand will need to be sprayed on a day like this. It's far too hot and it's going to dry out very quickly, so we'll keep spraying it, keep it nice and moist. It's not going to be particularly good for these sort of vertical edges, but you could use sand even on a slope like this, provided you keep it moist, and then you put the underlay down very quickly and the liner on top. But as I say, for this, really we're concentrating on the flat horizontal ledges around the edges for the sand. So let's hope we have a bit of fortune and the liner turns up as expected on time. And very soon we'll have a pond. Well, it's been a good day today. The liner is in. We've emptied out the holding tanks of our reserve water, which has been a really good way of speeding this whole process up. If we were relying on this hose to fill the pond, to get the liner seated correctly, we'd be waiting an awfully long time. So at least this gives us a bit of a head start in getting the liner bedded in properly. But we've still got a long way to go before the pond is full. We'll leave the hose on overnight. We've got lots of thunderstorms expected this evening, so I'm hoping that the water that we're going to be able to reserve from the overflow from the roof coming out of the 4-inch at the back of the pond is going to contribute and put a reasonable amount of water in if we get the rain. And tomorrow it should look a little bit fuller. A milestone day. Construction can begin very soon.